Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the culinary scene here at Roth Living for today's ownership experience for the Wolf Convection Steam Oven. Fantastic appliance, which we want to get you completely up to speed on so that you can make the most of having this appliance as part of your kitchen arsenal. So we're really excited to have you join us today. I think you just saw me remove these nice hot steam towels from the oven. These are infused with lemon and lavender essential oils. So just one of the other things that your convection steam oven can do. You can look forward to finding the technique and the recipe for this. Actually, there is a recipe for it, I guess, for doing this on the Culinary Scene website very soon. So you can come back and have a look at that. But that'll just be one thing that we'll cover today is some of these auxiliary programs that you can use on your convection steam oven as we go through. So we have these wonderful smelling hot steam towels that you could serve to your guests as a nice little treat before you start an elegant meal in your kitchen using the convection steam oven. So my name is Ben Davis. I am executive chef here at the Sub-Zero Wolf and Cove showroom by Roth Living in Denver, and I will be taking you through today's session on the use and care of the current generation of the Wolf Convection Steam Oven. So, as you look at your own oven and you're kind of considering what I have behind me in terms of my convection steam oven, if you have a control panel that looks very similar to this with simply a touch screen in the center screen, that is the current generation of convection steam ovens that we will be covering today. Should you own the previous generation of Wolf Convection Steam Ovens, you'll know that they're different because there is some etched symbols and words here on the left and right side of the touch of the screen. We have a link in today's description which will take you to a recorded video recording of that particular oven. Now, the great part is that oven and this oven, even though they look a little different in terms of the interface, they operate exactly the same way. So when we're talking about the different cooking modes in the oven, steam, convection, humid, we can talk about them universally across both platforms, even though this one is the latest version and that one, although you can still get it, is not currently in our distribution chain. So just remember that if you're curious about how to use the oven itself, today's session will cover exactly what's happening in the oven and how you use it to most effectively. However, when I talk about the interface, I'll be obviously describing this generation, so it may be a little bit different than what you guys have if you have the previous generation. So again, if you want to see a video recording of the previous generations of oven, then just check that one out and the link below in the description. So a couple of other things before we get started. I want to make sure that everybody received a copy of the Mastering the Convection Steam Oven Cookbook. This is a request we get a lot here at the showrooms, people asking us where can I go for more resources on using this oven. They may be a little intimidated by it, something like that. You really shouldn't be intimidated by it, but this book is a great way to really understand how your oven operates, the different particular modes. So if it doesn't come through clearly enough today, you can certainly use this as a great guide for understanding how the different modes work. And then you can apply that knowledge to your recipes so you don't feel like you need to completely reinvent a recipe just because you're using the convection steam oven as part of the cooking process. The other piece of literature that should have come with your oven that I hope you've been able to locate is just this quick convection steam oven cooking guide. It's two-sided. It's kind of a thicker piece of paperboard. It has some great tips and techniques for just using the oven straight away. No gourmet feature, just straight cooking, chicken breasts, vegetables, baked goods, all sorts of things. Gives you nice kind of layout of what mode to be using, the temperature, rack position, approximate time it'll take. A couple other tips and tricks are on this, so use this. It's a great way to help make those conversions from a traditional recipe that you might say, oh, I'm cooking in a conventional style oven, I want to use my steam oven. What's the best way to do that? You can just use this. You can kind of disregard a lot of the numbers from your recipe and use the numbers that are on this table, it will really help you a lot. So make sure you find this. And then the last two things that we're going to put a link up later. So come on back to this same link here on YouTube Live. You can come back and look in the description of today's event. You'll see two new links. One linking to a guide for all your gourmet features in the current generation model of the convection steam oven. These are all the different gourmet features. Again, very similar to the table that I was referring to earlier. This just gives you the gourmet features, and remember that gourmet in the Wolf vernacular means I'm not really sure how to cook it. Does my oven know how to do it? And then it gives you on-screen, step-by-step instructions for how to cook things in the convection steam oven. This is a list of all of them that are in your oven, so you'll be able to download this so you don't need to just scroll through the oven in order to find it. And then the last link will be for a nice rice and grains cooking guide developed by our chef in Minneapolis. He developed this sheet so that if you're liking to cook some quinoa, different varieties of rice, things like that, get a nice ratio of water to grain, and also cooking times, all that kind of stuff are right here, so you can download this as well. All right, so what we'll do today, we're really going to focus on the very basic use of this oven, right? How it goes together, how it functions, how you should start to treat it, how we take care of it in the beginning. Then we'll talk about those different cooking modes so you can become more knowledgeable about exactly what your oven is doing in those different modes, and that extends itself to what do you use those modes for, right? Why should I use convection steam instead of convection humid? Why should I not use steam at all and maybe just use dry convection air? And then we'll talk about some of the tips and tricks that we've learned here using the ovens here at the showrooms around Roth Living, and so we can kind of give you that that knowledge as well. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, you're going to need to make a YouTube account. Once you've made that account, you can log in, and that will enable you to use the chat feature at the bottom of the screen to type your question directly into that feature. That question will be relayed directly to me, right? And then I'll try to make sure I repeat the question and answer it for you as we go through today's session. Otherwise, you're going to have to type a comment, wait for us to see the comment, and then we'll respond to the comment in the comment section below today's event. However, it's a little faster if you want to make the YouTube account and then just ask the questions, and we'll get those things answered for you right away. So we'll start with the use, how we take care, how we use it, and then we'll finish up with a little bit on the care side of it. That's really nice part about the convection steam oven is that in many ways it is continuously cleaning itself through the use of steam in the oven. And then everything you see in front of me here, the roasted chicken quarters, the steamed asparagus, roasted mushrooms, olive oil cake, all baked in the convection or prepared in the convection steam oven using different modes. So you can see you can do a lot of different things in this oven. It really does replace so many appliances when we're talking about the use of this oven. And obviously we have our beautiful steamed towels. So let's talk about how the ovens go together. Now remember that even if you have the previous generation of oven, same thing, right? There's only some minor differences between the two generations, but let's just talk about how the ovens go together. So we're going to open this oven up. As you can see, this is our new 30-inch oven cavity, which is pretty big, right? It's a pretty large oven cavity, but I don't think that having the 24-inch model, whether you have this generation or the previous generation, it should really be looked at as a detriment. You can do so many things in that 24-inch convection steam oven. I mean, roast a 20-pound turkey, do a whole prime rib, 3 or 4 beef tenderloins simultaneously. You can do so much volume in that oven, you'd really be surprised what a great workhorse it is. But in both cases, in both generations of the oven, they go together in much the same way. We have heating elements that control the heat within the interior of the oven. So even though when we're using steam in the oven, we're not actually controlling the temperature with the steam in the oven, we're simply using the steam to humidify the oven cavity so that we get the benefit of using steam. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in a second. But those heating elements are behind the back wall where your convection fan, or fans, plural, are located. And then there is also an element below the floor, again, radiating heat upwardly so that we're creating that heat in the oven so we can control it very, very accurately. So all the heat is controlled from there. The steam is obviously input through 2 ports in this particular oven, one on the sidewall, one in the ceiling. in the previous generation, there's a single port steam injector. In the 24-inch, there's a single port, which is injecting the steam into the oven. Now, let's talk about steam and how that gets made in your oven. Remember that in your Wolf convection steam oven, you only use tap water, right? Just straight tap water. You do not need any distilled, deionized, demineralized water. You don't want to use anything like that. You just want to use tap water in order to make the oven create steam. In this case, we have the non-plumbed version. So we have our reservoir here. On every other model, the reservoir is also in the upper right-hand corner. You simply open the door or you just slide the reservoir out, and there's the reservoir. You see it here. There's a hole in the top. So we're going to fill that using water from our tap. Again, it's important because you need a certain mineral content in the water, right, that you're using to create the steam, so that should you run out of water during a steaming process, right, the oven will recognize there is no water in the reservoir, will automatically stop making or attempting to make steam, right, and then notify you that the reservoir needs to be refilled. Now, if you've installed the plumbed version of this oven, you obviously don't have to worry about this because there's a continuous water feed through the system. But for those of you with the reservoir system, you got to remember you just want to use tap water. Now, if you happen to own a reverse osmosis whole home water filtration system, right, that means that your entire home has the water filtered, right, by the reverse osmosis process. That water contains zero mineral content, none. So you will have to add some amount of minerality to the water in your reservoir. The best way to do that is when you fill the reservoir, you simply add a couple of tablespoons of water from any bottle of water, right? It can be, Perrier, it could be San Pellegrino, it can just be, Fiji water or Kirkland water from Costco. You can just pop that in there, a little bit of that water. That's going to be enough mineral content so that should you run out of water during the steaming process, the oven will realize that, stop making steam, alert you until that such time that you're able to refill the reservoir. Remember that if you do run into that and you stop and the oven has run out of water, you don't need to worry about losing the heat and the humidity in your oven cavity, because provided I do not open the door before I refill the water reservoir, I don't lose the humidity and I don't lose the heat. The oven just holds it in a static space at that point until you refill, and then it will resume cooking. So that's one of the good things about knowing that. So again, keep that in mind, just tap water, nothing special. You don't really need to keep your reservoir absolutely filled to the brim all the time. You want to keep some water in there to a certain extent, and you don't need to fill it or empty it every single time you use the oven. Just make sure there is some water if you're going to use a steam cycle. And then every once in a while, you can pop that reservoir out, wash it in the sink with some warm and soapy water. You don't need to put it in the dishwasher or anything like that. Just wash it, rinse it, refill it, pop it back in every so often. You're not really going to notice, any kind of degradation of the water in there as it sits for a week or two. The only time you'll probably want to make sure that the reservoir is completely dry is if you're going to be out of town for a couple of weeks, not using the oven at all. Then I would empty the reservoir, leave it dry while you're out of the home, and then you can refill it when you get back. Okay, so we've got our heating elements, again, below and aback. Just like all Wolf ovens, the racks in your convection steam oven are numbered from bottom to top. 1 on the bottom, 4 on the top. So we always want to keep that in mind, because rack position becomes so essential when we're talking about how we use the oven and how we cook in the oven. So knowing that those racks go from bottom to top, also really important. Now, if you have this current generation of ovens, right, this oven also has a broiler element, which is recessed up into the ceiling, right? That is obviously controlled here on the panel, but just know that you do have that broiler element up there in the ceiling. So just keeping that in mind, if you've used it, you obviously don't want to be cleaning up there when it's still hot, all those good things. But just keep that in mind, that there is that broiler element located in the top. So the oven is obviously simply operated via the touch screen, and by simply pressing on it, it will wake up, and then you'll see the different tiles that allow you to activate the different cooking modes. These tiles are easily rearranged to your preference. So if you know that you're going to use 5 or 6 of the modes most frequently, I would recommend that you put them here at the top of the first page, if you will, or first screen. There are actually 3 screens here, and you can just simply scroll up and down to view those 3 screens. But so you can rearrange the tiles by simply holding down on the item that you want to move, sliding it across to the middle, and then you can take it down, right, down to the next screen if you'd like, right? You can go down below by moving it downwards, and it's not wanting to move for me right now because my fingers are, so there it goes. So I can just slide it down like that. Allows you to rearrange tiles. So if you prefer to have the tiles that you and your family are using most often, you can always move them up to that home screen, and then you can always go back to the home screen by simply touching the home icon there on the left-hand side, which always takes you back to that very first screen, right? So each one of these tiles represents a set of cooking modes, right? Steam is obviously just steam. Convection has all 3 convection modes. And remember, this is very important to remember, that in this oven, there is no such thing as a still mode. In other words, the fans are always active when we are cooking in this oven. They're always moving the air throughout the oven cavity. So there is no such thing as a mode in this oven where there is absolutely no fan activity at all. Even in the steam mode, the fans are gently moving the steam around the oven cavity. So always expect to see that fan activity, right? So when we talk about using any of these modes, we simply touch onto the button that we desire to use, and then we're going to open up to this screen, which will always give you a synopsis of what you're about to start. Steam is the mode. There is the temperature of the current setting. In other words, 210 degrees would be the oven temperature, and the steam would tell you that we are using 100% humidity in the oven cavity when we're cooking with steam. That's when we understand what steam is doing. It's just in filling that cavity with that beautiful moist air, and it's doing that wonderful, just the way you would do it under the lid on a pot on your stove. The steam is creating that really moist environment. Now, if I want to change the temperature in any cooking mode, I simply touch on those numbers right there, and it tells you here on the side all the different particular aspects of this particular mode. In other words, it tells you use any rack position you want, right? 1 to 4. So the world is your oyster here. You can put it wherever you want because steam, because it is all enveloping when we cook with it, we don't need to worry about a very particular oven spot. There are other modes where it's going to tell you you should use this rack position for this type of cooking. And the only way to find this information out is always to touch on the temperature setting in that particular mode. That's going to open this up, and it's going to describe for you exactly how you can utilize the oven. So again, it recommends that you use the perforated pan, and you all know that you received with your oven a set of pans that will fit exclusively into your convection steam oven. This is the perforated pan, the 30-inch perforated pan. You see, you also got a solid pan, right? And there's also included in this oven, you get the porcelain enamel pan, which is also solid. But let's remember that you have your pans have 2 very distinct shapes on the side. You have a much more vertical side, and then you have the more beveled side here. Remember that when inserting the pan into the oven, it is the beveled side that faces the back of the oven. In other words, when I place this pan into the oven, if I'm going to use it to steam, it recommends that I place it in rack position 1. So I'm going to place it down here in rack position 1, just like that, with that beveled side facing the back. And the same thing will be true with my perforated pan. I'm going to place that wherever I'd like. So I just drop it in like that in rack position 2. But remembering that in the steam mode, I could do 3 or 4 should I choose to. The reason that we place a solid pan here underneath the pans that we may be steaming on is just to catch any excess liquid. This is particularly important when you are steaming seafood, fish, scallops, shrimp, lobster, crab legs, all of those things. A lot of that liquid, the water that comes off from heating those items or cooking those items, will then collect on the pan as opposed to on the floor of your oven. So it makes your oven much easier to clean and to maintain. should you not do this, right? Should you not leave this pan in the bottom position, you will collect a certain amount of water down here on the bottom. Now, you want to remember that if that does happen after you're done cooking in the oven, I recommend you take a clean towel, and once the oven is cool enough, which won't take very long, I would wipe off the excess water off the bottom of the oven cavity, because there is that heating element below the floor, and if I allow that water to sit there and then re-engage the element in a different cooking mode, the water will evaporate, but the food particles that were in the water will not. So you're going to have to go back and do a little more heavy-duty cleaning to clean the bottom of your oven. So it's always a good idea, if you haven't used this tray to catch the water at the bottom, it is to wipe up any excess water that's on the floor of your oven, right? That just saves you the trouble of having to clean it more extensively later. All right, so back to the steam mode. So here where it's steam, 210 degrees. It also shows you in the last item here is that you have a temperature range for this particular cooking mode, and each mode will have its own individualized cooking range for what it is you want to cook. In the case of steam, it goes as low as 86 degrees and as high as 210 degrees, right? So when we can set for lower temperatures, what do we use those temperatures for? Well, we can use them for defrosting food using our convection steam oven. And this is a great way for us to show you how to create your own programs within the oven that you can save for future use. Defrost is a great one to create because it's a very good chance that you're going to use defrost, if not once a week, maybe once every other week, because you don't want to be defrosting in a microwave oven because it's just partially cooking your food. It's not really just defrosting it, whereas in the steam oven, it's absolutely just defrosting it when we set it correctly. So how do we make that particular mode? Well, we do this by touching steam. And now we want to adjust the temperature, so we touch 210. Now we want to create a temperature for defrosting food. Ideally, that temperature is somewhere between 86 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. A little hotter makes it a little bit faster. So I recommend using about that 110 degree mark, works really well. So I just simply type in those numbers, 110, right? There I have that. So now I've got steam, right? Pure, beautiful steam at 110 degrees, again, controlled by the oven, right? Not by the steam. Now I want to set what we call a duration, which means we are telling the oven, cook for this long or steam for this long, and then turn yourself off or remind me to check. So what do? You go here to the options button, you open that up, and now you see here, you have a button that says, or a box that says duration. And if I want to set a particular duration or time for my defrost cycle, I simply press on that, and now I type in a number that's very easy to remember. In this case, let's choose 15 minutes because there aren't a lot of things that are going to defrost in less than 15 minutes. Shrimp might be one of the examples if you had some frozen shrimp. So let's do that. Let's type in 15 minutes, 1, 5. So now we have a 15-minute duration. We know it's steam. We know it's 110 degrees. We'll touch the set button, and now it shows you we have 15-minute duration at 110, so we can say okay. So now here's our example. I don't know why it went back to, so there, that's set, and there's our duration, 15 minutes. So there's steam, 110, 15 minutes. Now we want to save this, and we do that by touching the heart button, which is down here in the lower left corner. When we do that, it opens up our alphabet screen, so we're able to save the item in a way that we can always remember it, and it will create a tile on our home screen. So all we'll need to do when we want to defrost is simply touch that, and we don't have to go through this whole process. So you simply type in the word defrost. Now see, here's the name here. It says steam. If I want to take the word steam out, right, you have to wait, but I just go D-E-F, make sure I spell right. Where's the R, Ben? Of course, I can't see because I left my glasses on this. But you could just write DEF, or you can write defrost all the way. There it is. There it is, defrost, right? So now you hit set, and here it is right here, steam defrost. It's set right there at the little heart by it. So now every time you want to defrost something, you can simply come to the oven, touch that, you see you automatically hit start and it's steam for 110 degrees for 15 minutes. So then you would place whatever food that you had to defrost. You can either place it on the perforated tray, or if you would choose to do so on the wire rack, you can do that as well. Place it there, hit start, and off it will go and defrost your food, start defrosting your food in a great way. So you can save any process by simply creating it and then hitting that heart button, and then it'll open up the ability to save it, name it, and then you can keep it for the future. The other nice thing about that is if you don't want to keep it, you want to delete something, you make a recipe for something, you decide you really weren't as happy with it as you thought, you want to just erase it, you just erase it and it goes away and you go back to the beginning. I believe there's a total of, I think there's 36 panels that you can put on the total, maybe it's not 27 panels that you can put on the front of your oven. So that gives you a lot of choices. If you make up a lot of recipes and you want to save them there, you have a lot of spaces to use that. So we're just going to stop this now, and that's going to take it back to the beginning by just hitting the home button, right? So that's a great way to make a favorite, Keith. We have our question. All right, first question.
Ken would like to know, is there any cookbooks that you recommend that are specially made
for the steam oven? Okay. So the question from Kent is about whether or not there are any cookbooks out there specifically targeted to a convection steam oven. Unfortunately, other than the one that you got, right, with your oven, there aren't. However, there is actually a pretty good website that you could use, which is entirely dedicated to recipes for the convection steam oven. That's called steamandbake.com. It's a young Australian lady. She does a very nice job with her recipes. They're very diverse. Just remember, she is not specifically targeting a Wolf convection steam oven. She's looking at all brands of convection steam ovens across all the different brands. But she's very good in her recipes of describing that if you have an oven like ours, you should be using this mode or that mode. If you have a different brand, this mode or their mode. So it's pretty easy to decipher. The other thing that I would recommend to you is that if you are patient enough, and it should be very soon, much sooner than later, is that we will be launching our Culinary Scene website. So if you're visiting us today for this event, you will be invited to join this website. The beautiful thing about this website is that it is chock full of recipe videos and all the accompanying documentation on that recipe created by the 5 or 6 chefs here at the company who have created recipes not just specifically for the convection steam oven, but for all Sub-Zero Wolf and Cove appliances. So you'll see all those recipes. So just hold on for hopefully less than the next 30 days. You'll get that invitation. You'll be able to join the Culinary Scene, and then you can just look at all the recipes. And there are literally in the hundreds already of recipes that we've developed, many of them for this oven. So that'll be another great resource. I wish I could give you another cookbook. The other websites I've looked at, none of them really I think are very good, except for that gal in Australia. I think hers is quite good. Again, that is steamandbake.com. And then soon at the Roth Living website, you will be invited to join Culinary Scene, which will give you access to the recipes that we have developed here as a company. And I do think many of them are really first class, and not just mine, but certainly all the other chefs are great as well. So that's there you go, Ken. I hope that helps you out. I wish I could give you a better cookbook. Obviously, that's an opportunity for somebody to write a really good cookbook for the use and care of this oven. But again, make sure if you didn't get one of these, if you didn't get this cookbook, it's got a picture of a roasted turkey on the front. Just let us know, and we can drop one in the mail to you. If you get us your mailing address, we'd be happy to send you one because I've got extras. So, all right, so we're back to talking about those different modes. So again, steam, we not only use it for obviously defrosting the food, but it's great for steaming all your vegetables. We use the steam to cook the asparagus. You can use steam to just poach some chicken breasts. You can obviously use steam to cook all your seafood, your fresh fish, shellfish, all of those things. Just remember that when using steam for cooking seafood, it's always recommended that you use a slightly lower temperature than the maximum boiling point of water. Something between 175 and 200 degrees is usually an ideal temperature for steaming seafood. So you not only warm it, but you don't dry it out. You really enrich it with that moisture that you're using. Now, I get this question every once in a while. People say, gee, I've read that if you put some aromatic things in the water, it's great for steaming fish and things like that. Don't put anything but water in the reservoir. I have had people ask me, well, could I sneak a little white wine in there, maybe some soy sauce, something like that, just to give my steam a little more flavor? Problem with that is that that's going to go through your boiler system, and there's some sugars in there, there's some other compounds in there, kind of gunk up the works a little bit, so don't. You can steam, however, by placing the seafood, especially in an aromatic liquid, a bath, if you will. Put it in a 9x13 pan with a shallow bath of aromatic liquids and herbs and vegetables and things like that, and then just go ahead and steam it on the rack like this with your pan in the middle, your 9x13 pan with your fish in it, maybe some of those aromatic things. That'll give you a wonderful flavor, right? It'll just imbibe it with the flavors that you've got, and imbue it with the flavors that you've got. And then just remember, you don't need as much liquid because you're adding liquid with steam when you're using the steam cycle in the oven. So again, use steam for those things. Obviously, it's great for the delicate items, for all your vegetables, things like that. Again, this chart gives you some really good timing on how you'll cook your vegetables here. It's actually on the back, all the different vegetables from artichokes all the way down to zucchini. So all the different things that are there. So great way for knowing how to get your vegetables cooked. And it's a great way for doing prep, right? If you're doing some meal prep in the morning and maybe you're going to have a nice dinner party and you want to get your green beans blanched before you go to work so you don't have to worry about it when you get home, just go ahead, pop them in the steam oven, put them on the green bean setting, or just use the settings here on this little chart, and then you've got quickly blanched green beans. Pop them in some ice water into the fridge. They're ready to go when you get home that afternoon. And you didn't even have to wait for the water to boil because the steam is instantaneous, which leads me to that last point, which is when you use steam, you never preheat the oven. 0, 0, 0 time. No preheat required whatsoever. So if your recipe says steam for X number of minutes, you can simply place those X number of minutes into the duration function and just steam it for that amount. You don't wait for it to preheat. You don't add time to allow it to preheat. So we should talk about the convection modes and the 3 convection modes you have in your oven: convection, convection steam, and convection humid. Convection, right, just like in every other Wolf oven, not this one obviously, but in some of the other larger format ovens, that convection is just hot, dry air. So when you just want to do that baking that requires just that nice circulated, even air cavity throughout the oven, you can use convection mode. All that's going to do is drive that air from the back of the oven, right, giving you all that lovely heat just coming from the back wall of the oven. It has a nice temperature range of 90 to 445 degrees. So 90 and lower temperatures like that. You could even do some dehydrating in the oven with those lower temperature ranges. It also shows you that if you would ideally want to cook only in rack position 2, if you're on a single tray, but if you're using multiple trays, you should restrict those to rack positions 1 and 3 when roasting simultaneously, right? The food should be going into cookware that is suitable for those high temperatures. I think everybody would know that, right? That's the nice thing about this oven, is that because it has the steam, you can actually get away with some materials that are not as as happy in a really hot oven. So you can put them in the steam setting. I don't put a lot of plastic in this oven, but you can put some, plates and things like that without any worry whatsoever that they're going to become damaged by that. So convection, again, driving the air, circulating hot, dry air, great for crisping, for browning, your basic baking techniques, whether you're doing cookies, maybe some biscuits, something like that. You're going to get the best performance with just dry convection. And this is one of the questions we get a lot about using this oven. It's like, well, when do I use this oven instead of my other oven? What's the advantage, right? So you have to ask yourself, the first question you ask is, does steam benefit this process? Is steam going to make a difference in how this item is not only going to cook in terms of its finished, its moisture, but also about how quickly it's going to cook and how much it will speed it up, right? So in a convection system, obviously you're just talking about dry air, but one of the other convection modes is the one I think you're going to use the most frequently in this oven, because it really gives you the benefits of both the dry air from convection and the steam, right, that we saw in that first steam cycle. We're using convection steam. So convection steam, let's always remember that when we're using the convection steam mode in the oven, it is steam injected into the oven cavity 100% of the cooking time. So from the minute we start the oven to the time that we're done, there is steam being produced in the oven. Now, it's not as much steam in the oven as we had when we did just straight steam. That's about 100% humidity. In convection steam, we're talking about something closer to about 65% humidity. So we're still getting the benefits of steam, which is obviously the moisture that it's adding, but also remember that steam transfers heat to the food more efficiently than dry air. Ergo, it cooks your food faster because it's more efficient at moving the heat, so your food will cook faster and stay more moist. So with convection steam, right, we have a lot of great things that we can do with this oven. Again, primarily, if you're going to cook on a single tray with convection steam, it's just rack position 2. You can cook on both racks 1 and 3 should you choose to. The temperature range is a little less broad than just convection because the steam is adding a little bit of heat to that, but we go from 180 to 445 degrees using convection steam, and that gives you this vast array of things that you can cook in that particular mode. Because remember now, steam is not only providing the moisture, but it's accelerating the cooking, and it's also providing, in certain cases, an insulating factor, an actual barrier from the intense heat of the oven, because we could all agree that even 225 degrees, while in the case of an oven doesn't feel that hot, none of us want to be in a 225 degree oven. So we might need at times an insulating property that steam provides by slowing or by mitigating that intense heat right in the oven. So we can use convection steam for that because the steam is present with the dry air simultaneously. So the way we can think about that is by dividing up that temperature range of 180 to 445 into 3 kind of very loose zones of heat. The first would be the very lowest range, 180 to 275. What would I use convection steam most effectively there? Well, I might use it for doing some slow cooked meats that need that time to break down, to get tender, to get cooked. So briskets, shanks, ossobuco. Maybe you're going to do some pork shoulder, something like that. Something where you really want the moisture, right? Because you want to cook that piece of meat so that it starts to break down, gets all those connective tissues broken down, so it's really succulent, but it's beautiful and tender and juicy. That's when you're going to use convection steam at that lower heat setting, right? Again, 180 to 275. You're going to cook. Always remember, in convection steam, you never cover the food, right? Because you want the steam to be in contact with the food. There is one exception to that, of course, but when we're doing those braises, when we're doing that slow cooking using convection steam, we want that steam to come in contact with the food, so we want to leave it uncovered, right? Do you need to brown it off in the beginning? Yeah, it's a good idea to sear it a little bit to develop that flavor. The oven's not going to sear at 250 degrees. That's not really a great searing temperature, but it'll give you, nice, slow, moist cooking, right? Remember that when you use convection steam for those cooking techniques, cut your time by a minimum of 25 and sometimes up as long as 40% faster because of the steam being injected into the oven. It's going to cook those meats that need to go for a long time. It's really going to cut that time down a lot. I mean, we've made beef short ribs that would normally take maybe 3.5 to 5 hours in the oven. We've done those in just under 3 hours. So really does a great job getting them nice and tender and moist. I got to go back. It decided to abandon me there. So there in convection steam. There we go. So again, you have that temperature range there. That low range is also great for your egg set desserts, things like cheesecakes, custards, flans, things where you're going to do it so that you get this is where the insulating quality comes in, right? If you're baking a cheesecake in here, traditional style cheesecake, normally we do that in a water bath. We surround it with some boiling water, some very hot water. We place that pan in the oven. The oven oftentimes in those cases is set somewhere around 300, maybe 325 degrees. That's pretty hot. We don't want those eggs to scramble. We want that cheesecake to set nice and creamy and moist, right? But instead of doing a water bath in the convection steam oven, now we're simply using the convection steam setting somewhere in that low temperature range, somewhere in the neighborhood of 225 to 250 degrees. We do not need to put it in a water bath. We simply need to cover the top of our cheesecake with a little bit of plastic wrap. Now, don't get nervous that I just said put plastic wrap in the oven. It's not going to melt. I promise you that. Just double wrap your cheesecake, pop it in the oven on the rack, let it bake 225 degrees at for about an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 minutes, just until it's just jiggly, just in the middle. Take it out, let it cool down. You're going to have a perfectly set, non-cracked surface of your cheesecake. It's a great way to bake a cheesecake because, again, the steam is providing the insulation against that 225 degrees, which might normally, cause that cheesecake to set too quickly, set unevenly. That's not what you want. So we want to use that low temperature and the insulating qualities of the steam in there as well. So keep that in mind when you're using, if you've got recipes that call for that type of cooking with a water bath or something like that, you can just use the steam oven without the water bath. So that middle temperature range, again, we said the first one was 180 to 275, 275 to 375. If I'm roasting meats, right, if I'm roasting some of my chicken thighs and maybe I'm doing some pork tenderloin or I'm just doing a pork loin or something like that, and I'm not breading it, I just want to roast it, I want to cook it nice and moist, then you're going to use that central temperature range because you're not trying to make it super brown and crispy on the outside. You're just trying to get it really nicely cooked, moist, tender, perfectly cooked. So what are you going to do? You're going to use two things. You're going to use convection steam in that middle temperature range. If the recipe that you have called for roasting that item, say at 375 degrees, you could easily drop the temperature in your convection steam oven up to 25 degrees and still get very similar effect. Definitely want to be using your temperature probe when you do that. And the temperature probe insertion point in your oven in this model is here on the left-hand side of the oven. You're simply going to plug that probe in, right? Once I've plugged that probe in, if I want to set my probe temperature, it's under the options button. I touch that, and here right there it says probe temperature right here. So if I touch on that, it tells me now I can set my probe temperature anywhere between 90 and 210 degrees. So I can never set my probe above the boiling point of water, but I can set it anywhere in there, and it will tell me exactly when the probe reaches that temperature after I've inserted it into whatever it is I'm cooking. Just make sure that when you insert the temperature probe, that you insert all of the steel shaft of the probe into the food that you're cooking. Don't just stick it in about 1.5 inches, because if there's any metal exposed to the oven cavity, the probe is going to read that temperature first, and you're going to cook your rack of lamb in about 45 seconds because that probe is going to heat up really quickly. It's going to think your rack of lamb is done, but your rack of lamb is actually raw. So you want to make sure that you insert all of the probe into whatever it is you're cooking, and then set the temperature here, whatever you'd like. So if I was doing rack of lamb, I might do 132, something like that. Now I've set my temperature, probe temperature, hit OK. So what I have is right now the probe is sitting at 84 degrees or 82 degrees, and my goal is 132. And you'll watch it count up as it's cooking. So as I hit start now, the oven will preheat to that temperature, and the probe will be reading that temperature. Remember that in convection steam mode, you very, very, very infrequently are required to preheat the oven. There's only a couple of exceptions with that. When you're cooking something that very quickly, you might want to preheat it because you're going to jump start it by putting it into a hot oven cavity. But anything that's going to take longer than 20 minutes to cook, you don't preheat the oven. You just let the oven heat up with the item being cooked in place, because remember what's happening. Remember what I said at the beginning. There is always steam present in the convection steam cycle. There's always steam. So the minute I hit start, steam injected into the oven while the oven is preheating. That steam is starting to do a lot of the cooking as the oven is reaching temperature. So my chicken that's cooking in there, maybe my chicken thighs are roasting in there, they're still cooking, even though it's not a super hot oven. They're cooking because the steam is softening and it's doing a lot of the work. As the oven gets hotter and hotter and hotter, then the hot air, right, the part of that convection steam mode starts to take over, and it starts doing a lot of the heavy lifting, if you will, a lot of the work, and then they're working together. The steam is doing the moisturizing and the cooking internally. That crisping and browning is happening because of that convection air. So again, very rarely do you need to preheat the oven in convection steam mode, and I usually reserve the preheating times for when I am going to put something in the oven for less than 20 minutes. And believe it or not, you can cook a chicken breast from ice cold to completely cooked in 10 minutes in the convection steam oven by simply waiting for the oven to preheat in convection steam, about 365 degrees, pop that in there, 10 minutes later, perfectly cooked chicken breast works really, really well. So again, convection steam, first two zones, right? Low zone, medium. The high zone, which is like 375 to 445 degrees, that's when you think of your oven like an air fryer, right? If I want to do some air frying in here, I want to do that using convection steam at a very high temperature. And I've got the setup for it that came with the oven because I have my porcelain enamel pan and its rack. So if I'm going to do some air frying in here, I'm going to use this setup. I'm going to place my food on the rack. I'm going to put it into the convection steam oven in that high zone, somewhere 425, 440, 445, really hot. Pop it in there. Now I've got circulating air. I've got steam. So not only are my chicken wings or whatever it is I'm air frying is cooking, or my French fries are cooking, right? The steam is softening them. It's making those potatoes tender in the inside, but that hot air, that's what's driving it, and that's going to make it crispy. So when we want something to be crispy on the outside, whether it's potatoes, whether it's a breaded piece of protein like a chicken breast or a fish fillet, or maybe even you're doing a pork chop, a milanese, where you've breaded some pork chops and you want to brown it up, but you don't want to fry it. You want to be a little more healthy. You can do that using the convection steam oven by simply placing those items on the rack, putting them in the convection steam cycle at that high temperature, and using it for browning like that. That high setting for convection steam is also great for roasting your vegetables, right? If you love roasted vegetables, like you love roasted broccoli, or you like some roasted green beans, as we're getting into the summer, there's going to be fresher and fresher vegetables. You want to roast some zucchini, you want to do something like that, then you definitely want to use convection steam at that high temperature level to get the browning, to get the crisping, to get all of that flavor out of it. So that's what you use convection steam for there as well. All right. So again, remember, with convection steam, you almost never preheat unless you're cooking something for less than 10 minutes, right? And you just kind of you can do two racks simultaneously, but always remember that steam is there, so everything's going to cook faster. So get your brain set to think, yes, it's going to be done sooner. Use your probe if you're cooking meats, because then you're going to know exactly how hot it is on the inside, and that's going to be important, so you'll know exactly when it's done, right? So that's really a great thing to use. Now, the other convection mode is an interesting mode because it doesn't make any sense to a lot of people, because it says convection humid. And what does convection humid mean versus convection steam? Well, obviously, when we're using convection steam, we need to have some water in the reservoir because it's making steam that's injecting into the oven cavity. However, in convection humid, even with a dry reservoir, when I open the door, I'm going to get steam coming out of the oven, because in convection humid mode, what I've told the oven is, you don't need to make any steam, but I don't want you to release any moisture that's produced by the food that's being cooked from the oven. So something that's already very moist going into the oven can be used and baked or cooked in convection humid mode. Great example is this olive oil cake. It's obviously a batter cake. It's a very, soft liquid batter when it goes into the oven. There's a lot of moisture there, right? I use convection humid, and look how beautiful my cake came out. Stays nice and moist because it's retaining a lot of the moisture produced by the food as it's being cooked in the oven cavity. So items that are already very moist before they get baked, cakes, bundt cakes, olive oil cake, obviously, but casseroles, right? If you're making lasagna, or maybe you're making a wonderful chicken enchilada casserole, something with a lot of moisture in it, you made a beautiful, bechamel sauce, and you threw some cheese in there, so you got it some flavor, you're popping it in there. You want to retain a lot of that moisture. You don't want to cook it out, right? So we use convection humid because that traps that moisture in there, but steam's not really going to benefit a casserole. You don't want to soften the top and cook the top of the casserole faster using steam, but you want to retain moisture. Convection humid is the way. It's also a great way, believe it or not, for roasting whole poultry. So if you're doing a turkey breast or a whole chicken, right? Cooking with convection humid really helps retain a lot of the moisture in those items, and it also allows the outside to brown really nicely because we're not injecting the steam, but we're holding a little moisture there, so you get a nice crisp exterior on your bird, but also you're cooking it faster and retaining a lot of moisture. So convection humid, we use it for those things. It has a nice wide temperature range, just like convection. Just like regular convection, it'll go from 90 to 445, so you have a very wide range, but again, it's retaining a lot of that moisture in there, so you can use it for those items that you're just afraid that you might dry out a little bit. It's great for muffins, things like that you could easily dry out when you're baking, right? And the steam doesn't benefit a muffin, right? So adding steam to a muffin is not really going to make the muffin better, which is what that question you have to ask yourself is steam going to help here? And in this case, in many cases, convection humid is the answer for that, because you're not adding steam, you're just simply retaining moisture. Okay, so the other mode that you have in here, which is a basic cooking mode, is your broil mode, right? Just like the broilers in our larger format ovens, you have the ability to just broil with the top heat directly. Obviously, when you're going to be broiling, I recommend that you broil on the rack on this pan. If you want to keep your pan a little cleaner, line it with a little foil. In the case of broiling in this oven, you have basically 3 settings. You have a high, medium, and low setting. Again, use the high setting for cooking proteins, right? If you're broiling some steaks, you want to broil some chicken breasts, you're going to take them from a raw state to a cooked state, you're going to want to be using the high heat setting up here. Oh, excuse me, I hit the wrong button. High, right there. That's what you're going to want to be using when you're cooking, right? That's going to give you the most control and the most replication of outdoor grilling, things like that, which is all a broiler really is an upside down grill. I like to preheat my broiler a little bit, maybe 5 to 7 minutes at the most. It gets very, very hot. Obviously, if you have a very thick cut of something that you want to broil, you can drop it down to rack position number 3. But if you have something a little skinny, a little thin, like less than an inch thick, you can put it up here in rack position number 4, because obviously it's going to be, the height in number 4 is not going to extend too high above the surface of the rack. So it's just right there. But if you have something really thick, you might want to move it down a single rack position, right? The low and medium settings, you're going to use those for browning, for crisping, for toasting, things like that. So very easily, you're not really cooking something at that point. You're just embellishing, or you're finishing something off using the broiler element. So that's what you use those settings. Chef, question. Okay, okay, great. All right. So Nina has a question about using parchment, right, in the oven. That's a great question, Nina, because, parchment has obviously the desired effect of making it very easy to clean the bottom of your tray. However, in certain instances, parchment also can hold a little moisture and create a little excess moisture at times when you might want something to be a little crispier or a little browner. Then parchment can kind of be working against you a little bit. So what I would recommend is that if you are baking in this oven, if you're doing any kind of baking on the solid tray, parchment is perfectly fine. If you're doing cookies, biscuits, whatever, parchment's great on these. You could also use silicone mats. You might have to use 2. This is a very big tray. And even with the perforated tray, the one we have here, you can line that with parchment and use that as a baking tray as well. Now, parchment, when you're roasting some meats or things like that, it's not a bad idea if you're doing some sort of slow cooked meats where you want to kind of let it go for a while and you're not really worried about browning on the exteriors. But if you want a little more exterior flavor development and color development, then I would recommend, instead of parchment, to use a little bit of aluminum foil. That will make cleanup as easy, if not, maybe not quite as easy as parchment, but if by lining this tray with a little foil, it'll make it much easier to clean up. So I would do that if I'm going to want to encourage some browning, or if I was like, roasting some chicken breasts or whole chickens, I might line this with a little bit of foil instead of parchment, just because then the moisture will not be as prevalent on the bottom. So I hope that helps with the question, with the answer with the parchment. But you can use parchment in this oven. There's no problem with that whatsoever. Under the broiler, maybe not a good idea. I would definitely use foil if I'm using the broiler. for that. And then there's one other setting under the broiler, which is convection broil. So this is unique. We used to have convection broil on some of our other ovens. We got rid of it there, but we brought it back here. So convection broil, instead of just having high, medium, low, convection broil gives you temperature options, right? So it's not only engaging the broiler to give you that really nice top crisping, browning effect of the broiler, but now it's using those convection fans and the circulating air to really accelerate cooking. So if you have something that you want to really get crispy quickly, right? Maybe you've roasted something, maybe you roasted a chicken and it didn't get quite as brown as you'd like. Just put your oven into convection broil, put it up really hot, and then pop your tray with your chicken in down here in rack position 1 or 2, and just let that air and that broiler give you that little extra bit of browning, right? It's a great way to use it. It cooks really, really quickly. So, Chef Gil and I have found that convection broil in some ways is much more effective in terms of doing some cooking in the oven when you're using the broil feature. The convection broil really grabs the best of both by using both the convection fans and the broiler element. So it's a super way to cook. So use that convection broil when you really want to get that browning down done quickly at very high temperatures, up to 445 degrees. So it has a nice wide range. So that's perfect for convection broil. All right, so those are kind of base cooking techniques. You're going to be in control here. You're telling what the oven how to cook it. You're going to tell the oven at what temperature you would like. Remember that whenever you want to set a duration for the cooking, right? So if you have a recipe that says you need to steam this item for exactly 12 minutes, remember that that duration feature is always located underneath the options button. So if I touch on options, regardless of which mode I'm in, the duration feature will open, and then I can type in the time that I want the oven to cook, and it will literally start. It'll cook for that exact amount of time, and then it'll turn itself off. At the end of that process, the oven will ask you, would you like to do something else, right? Would you like to continue with a subsequent step to this? If you say yes, the first question the oven is going to ask you is, do you want to keep doing the same thing for longer, right? You can say, no, I want to do something different, and then you can go back and do something different, but the oven will always ask you, it's like, did it cook long enough? Do you want to go 5 more minutes, 2 more minutes, however long you want? It'll always ask you at the end of a duration. When you set a duration for whatever process that you are taking on, you can also set an end time, which is very convenient when you have a party that you're throwing and you'd like your hors d'oeuvres to be ready just about the same time your guests are arriving, but you know that you won't be able to be in the kitchen at the exact moment to set the oven up to cook them. Well, you can do that by using a duration feature and then underneath it an end time. So to do a practical example of that, let's say we had some hors d'oeuvres that we needed to bake, right? And we wanted to use the convection mode, and they were going to need to bake for, say, 20 minutes. So what we would do is we would come and touch convection and do that, open it up, do convection. We'll set our temperature here. Let's say our temperature is 375, right? And then we touch the options button, and we know it's a duration of 20 minutes. So we'll type in our 20-minute duration, set, and now we want to set an end time that's further in the future than 20 minutes from right now. So I simply touch on end, and if I'd like them to be done 5 minutes prior to my guests arriving at 5:30, I might type 5:25 p.m., hit set, right? So now what have I got? I've got a timed cook at 20 minutes, right? A duration of 20 minutes at 375 degrees of convection heat, and I want it to be done at 5:25 p.m. I touch OK. It gives me my synopsis of exactly what I just said. So if I touch start, the oven immediately says it will start in 1 hour and 7 minutes from right now. So if I have things to do, I can simply place my tray of hors d'oeuvres in the oven, and when it's time, the oven will automatically turn on and cook to that point. So another question. Great. All right. So the reheat question. Nina, great question, because there is nothing this oven does better. Well, in fact, there's no other oven on the planet that does that better than this. And so let's get to that section right here. So we're going to talk about reheating, right? We're going to talk about how to reheat in this oven. So you have a reheat function, right? It's on the oven right here. If I touch reheat, I see that I have 3 choices to reheat. If you have the previous generation model, you will have the reheat function, which is its own box in the scroll bar. And also you have the auto reheat function, which is located under the more button. So if you touch more, then you'll see a group of boxes line up. Scroll over to where it says auto reheat. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So your 3 choices for reheating are just standard reheat, auto reheat crispy, or auto reheat humid. If we talk about standard reheating, we look at that. When we reheat, right, the oven will never exceed 250 degrees, because if I reheat something at a temperature higher than 250, I'm just cooking it again, which is dumb, because then I'm drying it out, right? I don't want to double cook something. I want to reheat it. So the oven limits you to 250 degrees, right, when you are reheating, right? So how long will it take to reheat something in your convection steam oven? Generally speaking, if I'm just going at 250 degrees to reheat something, I should expect a reheat time for a plate of food to be somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes, right? Not as fast as a microwave, but always even and more consistent. Remember as well that in the convection steam oven, I can reheat on multiple trays at the same time. So I could place my perforated tray down here, right? Whoops, that's a squeaky noise. Sorry. I could reheat with a tray there and a rack here. And I can place 4 plates simultaneously and then reheat, right? So I would simply go to options and tell it that I want that reheating duration to be 9 minutes. So it's a 9-minute reheat setting. And now I just place everything in. You do not need to preheat. Again, place it, hit set, and then hit OK. So you're going to start. So it's 250 degrees reheating for 9 minutes. Remember that when we reheat, the first thing the oven does is it injects a small amount of steam into the oven to refresh the food. So if the food has been in the refrigerator and it has dried out a little bit over time, it will then refresh it with steam, then raise the temperature to 250 and get it nice and hot, right? That's the way we reheat with that. Now, the other options we have on this oven to reheat is by using these 2 auto cycles: reheat humid, reheat crispy. What the oven is going to ask you is simply, by choosing one or the other, how do you want the food that you are reheating to be at the end? Would you like it to be moist and soft and hot, like if I was reheating maybe a slice of pot roast with some mashed potatoes and some vegetables? I want to reheat everything. Well, I think everything in that sense would probably be nice so that it's not really crispy. I don't have a shell or a crust on anything. So I would just use reheat humid. If I touch reheat humid, what you're going to see is that the oven just says, you just want it to be reheated humid in a way that it's nice and moist. So look at what you've got here. There's no way to change the temperature. You don't have any control. It's telling you that it's going to take 15 minutes, but that's a guess, because what's going to happen is I'm going to take my plates, I'm going to place them in the oven, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to hit start. The minute I hit start, right here it says determining duration. Do not open the oven during this time. So what it's telling you is it knows what you want to do. You want to reheat something in a humid manner so that it's nice and moist, but also heat it all the way through. What you're telling it you don't know is, I don't know how long this is going to take, so you figure it out. So what the oven is doing is saying, all right, I know 2 things. 1, reheating food. 2, she wants it to be nice and moist in a humid, soft environment. Okay, I got to figure out how much she just put into the oven. So what it's doing right now to determine the duration is it's taking the temperature of the oven, and then it raises it to another temperature. And by calculating the time it took to go from temperature A to temperature B, it can calculate the approximate mass of the food in your oven and then give you a duration for how long it will take to reheat it. So it will make all those calculations because it's based on the 2 things that it knows. You want reheated food and you want it to be nice and moist and tender. That's what it knows. So when you use those 2 modes, the reheat humid or reheat crispy, You're simply telling it, this is how I would like my food to be reheated when it comes out. So if you have something that has a crust on the outside, like, leftover chicken pot pie, or maybe you have some egg rolls, or you have some crispy, wontons or something that you'd like to reheat, but you want that shell to stay nice and crispy. Or you want to reheat yesterday's loaf of bread, but you'd like the crust to be a little bit, crackly again, like it was when it came out of the oven the first time. You can reheat crispy yesterday's loaf of bread, and it's going to reheat your bread, keep it nice and moist on the inside, because again, there's always a little steam in a reheat mode, and the crispy part just adds a little extra energy to make the outside crispy. So that's the best way to reheat. You do multiple racks or at once, multiple plates at once, multiple dishes at once, and you can do it that way. Now remember too, you have a couple of other choices here. You can do this when you go to options, right? You can start it later, so you can delay that start, and then you can do a timed cook as well. If you want to reheat something using your temperature probe, so you know exactly how hot it is inside. So let's say you had a bowl of mashed potatoes that you had to make yesterday because you weren't going to have time today, and you want to reheat it. You can simply come back to reheat settings, hit reheat, regular reheat, and then come here, go to options, probe temperature. So I can set a probe temperature for my reheat. So what I would do is take my temperature probe, insert it into my bowl of mashed potatoes, plug it in, go to the probe temp, and then type what I would like my probe temperature to be to have my potatoes nice and hot all the way through. I might set that to like 150 degrees. So now my temperature, my reheating is basically going to be based on the internal temperature of the probe. So I know that 150 degrees is pretty hot for mashed potatoes, so that when I take them out, they're going to be nice and hot all the way through, because this is in the middle. So then all I have to do is give them a quick stir, and now I've got nicely reheated. So you can just use that, right? So now what I'm just telling, I want you to reheat to 150 degrees on the probe at 250. Again, a little bit of steam, always with reheat. So Nina, I hope that answers your question about reheating in the oven. But just remember, when you reheat, you don't cover anything, right? Because again, a little bit of steam, you want the steam to touch the food. So just remember that when you're reheating, okay? So there's that reheat setting. The last setting that a lot of people might or might not use, I don't know. I don't know how many of you are really into sous vide cooking, but sous vide is a cooking method where you're cooking in a vacuum sealed bag, right? You're placing it into the oven cavity in the bag, right? And then cooking it at a temperature not to exceed the temperature at which you would like to serve that food. In other words, if I have a beautiful ribeye steak that I would like to serve at exactly 132 degrees Fahrenheit, what I can do is place said ribeye into a vacuum seal bag, or if I don't have a vacuum sealer, I can use a Ziploc bag by simply placing the steak into the Ziploc bag, placing the bag, lowering it into a basin of water, and then as the air is forced out of the bag by the pressure of the water, I just close the top. So that's close to a vacuum. It's not a perfect vacuum, but it's close. Once I have that bag done, I set the bag here on the rack or on the perforated tray, whichever I prefer, set my internal temperature to the temperature that I would prefer. So if I want 132, right, I set the oven temperature to 132, type set, and then I type in start. So remember the principle behind sous vide. Sous vide basically is based on the physical principle that the temperature of the food can never exceed the temperature of the environment in which it is being prepared. So in other words, if I've set the interior of the temperature of the oven to 132 degrees, my steak can never exceed 132 degrees. So it's going to take a while to cook my steak at 132 degrees, but I know it'll never overcook. So I set my steak in the oven at 132 degrees for 90 minutes. Or I could go a little longer if I wanted, but I would do a minimum of 90. Then when I take my steak out, I pop it out of the bag, dry it off a little bit. I heat up my cast iron skillet, get it really hot, sear it on both sides. Now I have a perfectly cooked steak on the inside with a perfect sear on the outside, and it's exactly 132 degrees, which is the way I like my steak. So I know it's never going to be overcooked. That's how you cook sous vide in your convection steam oven. So if you are interested in sous vide, if you've experimented with it, if you're already a pro at using sous vide and you have a circulator and you have all those things on your kitchen counter, just use your CSO for the same thing. It's going to do almost exactly the same job as the circulator. The only difference is that in the oven, right, I don't have the pressure of the water against the sides of the bag. So it could be a slight variations in the way it cooks, but most often you're going to get exactly the same effect cooking sous vide in the oven as you would in a water bath on your countertop or on your stovetop, but it'll maintain that temperature for as long as you need it to go. So if you're going to sous vide something for something, say 25, 26 hours, right? You may have to add a little bit of water, but remember that at lower temperatures, the water in your reservoir is used up much more slowly, so that you're, instead of getting only 2.5 hours of steam time out of your reservoir tank, you can get easily 10 to 12 hours of steam time, because the oven is not evaporating the moisture as fast, and it's keeping that relative humidity very high by using less water at a lower temperature. So again, the sous vide setting is not something that everyone's going to use, but it is there, and it's a lot of fun to use. So the other settings that you have in here, and then if you've got a Wolf oven, if you're familiar with Wolf ovens, you know about the gourmet settings. Gourmet settings are great because all you do is open up the gourmet setting, and then you find what it is that you're cooking, right? So if I want to do some side dishes, I can look in the side dish choices, and here's a whole section of potatoes, and I want to do one of these potato choices, right? I might want to be doing some potato wedges, or maybe I want to roast some potatoes, or I want to cook some sweet potatoes. I simply touch on it, and it says, okay, I want to bake some potatoes. Well, baked potato, right? So I hit that, and now I can just kind of review it right on the screen. So it's going to do a side, it's potato, baked potato, it's baking. And it shows you right here on this side what mode it's going to use. It's going to use the convection steam mode. So I touch set, and now the oven tells me, okay, it's going to do potatoes at 445 degrees, convection steam for a 40-minute duration. So you just go ahead and if you touch this, it tells you what rack position to use, the solid pan, and the temperature range for the oven is 445 degrees. That's all you have to know, right? It doesn't tell you to preheat it, so you don't have to preheat it. You just pop the food in right away, touch OK, and you hit start, and you just pop everything in. So it gives you those on-screen instructions in the gourmet mode, which is why that we're providing you with this document that you'll be able to download very soon, which gives you all the different gourmet features on your oven, right? So you can see them all here, so you don't have to go through scrolling and looking at them all here. You can look at them here, so you can kind of understand exactly what your oven is thinking when it wants to do that. But one of the other modes here that we have, I'm gonna go back to the home page, is this here that says Gourmet Plus, right? So what is Gourmet Plus? Well, it's not something you have to pay extra for. It's basically just a Gourmet Plus is a way that you tell the oven, right? Just like with the auto reheat, where I'm saying, I want you to reheat this in a crispy fashion. Well, here is what I want to bake something or cook something in a particular way. So if I have some beautiful, fresh, little tomato and goat cheese and Niçoise olive tarts that I want to bake as an appetizer, I can go to the fresh appetizer button, and I just open that up. I hit OK. And again, the oven says, we're cooking fresh appetizers. You would like them to be like a medium brown, but if you don't like medium brown, you want them a little darker, you can choose well browned or lightly browned, either way, whatever you prefer. So if I say well brown, okay, tells me now the duration is 37 minutes and 30 seconds, right? But we all know that, like the auto reheat function, the oven is going to figure out how long it's going to take to cook those. I can promise you this. It'll never be 37 minutes and 30 seconds. It'll always be faster. It gives you that estimate, I think, really to make you feel better, because it says, it always gives you it's negotiating with you. I'm going to give you this time, and now you're thinking, no, I want it this fast. It's going to be faster. But it's figuring the same thing out. It's figuring out how hot, how much steam, and because it's figuring out the volume of the appetizers that you've placed into the oven. And once you've figured out that volume by taking the temperature readings and measuring, then it'll give you a duration. So that's what Gourmet Plus does, right? Gourmet Plus always gives you those choices. And it's only got a few choices in here right now, like potato gratin, vegetable gratin, different types of bread baking, braided breads, and then fresh appetizers. Gives you all those choices that you just tell the oven, I want to bake this. It asks you how you like it. you say this, and then it figures out the rest, and you don't have to do any more work. You just let it cook. So that's what Gourmet Plus is. And like I said, there's fewer of those here as well. You have a bread and pastry section right down here, which is mostly for breads, right? So for those of you who are bread bakers, right, you can come in here and if you want to proof your bread in the oven, you want to prove it, you want to use that nice, moist, steamy air to prove the dough. There it goes. Right there. It's adding a little bit of steam. It's only going to 90 degrees. So it's a great, nice environment for proving your bread doughs. So that bread and pastry section, right, also has different types of breads, and it describes to you a little bit about the bread. So right here, the glazed is ideal for braided breads and other yeasted pastries prepared with the glaze. So if you're making some cinnamon rolls, or you're making a beautiful loaf of challah, or you've got a nice loaf, you want to use that section. And again, it's going to walk you through on screen exactly what you need to do as you walk through it. So those gourmet features, again, you just have to read through it. Again, always looking, if you want the full synopsis of it, touch the temperature, and there it is right there on the side. Tells you exactly what you need to do to bake that type of bread in your oven by simply opening up that temperature right there, and it's all right here, right? And the steaming is automatic, right? It takes care of the steam, because those of you who bake a lot of bread know that we want to add a little bit of steam to that oven cavity to give ourselves the best possible loaf, right? So again, bread and pastry is there, but here are some of the really fun things that you're going to want to know about. And the one that I really want to emphasize for those of you who have been to my chef's table, or maybe you've been to another chef's table at one of the other showrooms around the company, is this slow roasting mode. The slow roast mode is something that only this oven can do, right? Because it can actually then prepare different cuts of beef, lamb, pork, veal, and miscellaneous meats like venison and bison and things like that, right? To an exact internal specification to be done at the exact moment in time that you would like to serve it. And you don't even need to rest it, because the oven will rest it for you. So this slow roast mode is right there for just doing that, right? So if I come into the oven and I open up slow roast and I want to do, maybe I want to do a nice leg of lamb, right? It's coming into, it's just past spring now, but maybe we've got some beautiful spring lamb that we've got, and we want to roast that leg of lamb. We just open up slow roast, we go to lamb, we touch the lamb button, tells you that's the way it's going to cook it. So there it is, lamb, leg of lamb, slow roasting, seared, right? It's going to walk you through it. So first thing it's going to ask you is, how do you want it internally, right? What's the temperature you desire? It's got medium and well done. God knows why you would ever do it well done, but I get it. Some people do, but that's telling you that medium leg of lamb is 149 degrees. You're obviously going to have to use your temperature probe, so you can do that. You want to see the duration is 3 hours and 30 minutes. So it's a long cooking process. That's why it's a slow roasting mode. But the advantage of this is that within that 3 hours and 30 minutes, it's going to fully cook it. It's going to rest it for you, so that at the moment that you tell it you want it to be done, it is absolutely ready to be removed from the oven and then served, right? So there's the duration is 3:30. So if I want to change the end time, I go to the options button, open that up, right? It's a 3 hour and 30 minute program. And if I type that in, I can adjust the time that you can cook it. I think the quickest you can cook most of these things is 2 hours and 30 minutes. Some of them will let you extend it as long as 4 hours and 30 minutes, but it'll always give you a range of how long. I will recommend to you that it is always preferable to cook something longer than it is to cook it shorter in the slow roasting mode. In other words, if you can do it in 3 hours and 30 minutes, do it. Don't try to rush it and cook it in 2 hours and 30 minutes. It's not quite the same outcome, and that's mostly due to the resting time. When you try to rush it, it doesn't rest as completely. So you can change it, and you can obviously change the end time so that I can set the end time, right, for at least 3 hours and 30 minutes in the future from right now. So in other words, if it were 1:30 in the afternoon, I could have this done by 5 p.m. at the earliest, but I could certainly set it for 6, 6:15, 6:20, 6:33, whatever I choose, by simply typing it in there. So long as I have that duration of time between right now and when I would like to serve it, the oven will calculate when it needs to start, and it will roast it to that exact internal temperature that I've specified, and then I can get it to be done exactly when I want it. So use the slow roasting feature to set up your meal so that everything that goes around the meal, right? The side dishes, the salads, the sauces, the desserts, all of that are all what you focus on, because the oven will take care of the roast for you. It'll take care of that leg of lamb or that prime rib or whatever it might be, so that you know that that's going to come out exactly when you need it to be done at the exact internal temperature that you've specified. And all you have to do is take it out and slice it. Everything else then can revolve around that. So you know that this will be perfect. It will absolutely be perfect, as long as you've done exactly what you're supposed to with your temperature probe and you've inserted it all the way in so that it's reading accurately and getting the degree of cooking that you want. So you set all of those things up. Once it's set, you type OK. So now it sees the duration is 3 hours and 30 minutes. In this case, it would be done at 10 minutes or 11 minutes before 8 p.m. tonight. And then it'll off-wait, and it'll just take care of everything else. So use that slow roasting feature. I think you'll find that it is a fantastic feature to use on your oven. Really, really great. The steam towel feature is under the wellness button. So if you touch wellness there, you can do all your steam towels, hot wraps, stone massage. If you're familiar in parts of Switzerland and northern Italy and France, instead of using like electric heating pads, they use seed cushions made with cherry stones or grape seeds in a natural packet. You can heat those up and use them as a compress or something like that. So it's in there as well. So the cleanse, you're probably not going to use it that often, but it's fun. So I would recommend that you try it out. The other one that we like to use here a lot is the cleanse feature, right? And that's if you're ever doing any kind of preserving, jams, jellies, pickling, mustards, things like that, and you want to seal those jars, you can use the prepare jam jars in the preserve jam mode. The prepare jam jars is when you place the jams open, the jars open in on the rack in. It sterilizes them for you, keeps them nice and hot. You then fill them, lid them up, pop them in, hit the preserve jam feature, and it will preserve those so it seals them just like if you were boiling them on the stove in a pot of water. Now, if you are one of those people who like to preserve fresh vegetables like tomatoes and things like that, those really require more of a pressure canning environment. This can't do that. So don't do that kind of preserving. But for jams, jellies, condiments, things like that, and you want to preserve them, this is a fantastic tool for that because you can do a lot at once. So all of those are here. Now, a lot of you are probably asking about, all right, how do you clean it? How do you take care of it? All of those things, really easy. On this current model, right, we have the steam cleaning feature, which is right here. It's one of the tiles on the front. You simply open the steam clean. So the first is the steam cleaning function, and that will walk you through. There are 4 steps. The first action is to remove all of the racks and the side racks, which just come out very easily with this small gnarled nut that comes off. Those racks just pop out of the oven. Then you close it up, you hit start, it will steam clean. Usually takes about 25 minutes of nice, intense, hot steam. It will then step you through where you do the next action, which is a drying function, right? So the oven will heat up, you crack the oven door a little bit, allows the excess moisture out, helps you clean it, right? At this point, if you would choose to, if you have some really nasty stains in there and you have a really nice, hot, steamy environment in the oven, it's been steamed for a while, and you need to do a little scrubbing, that's not a problem, so long as you use the proper equipment. So you can use the Barkeeper's Friend as long as you apply it with either the Scrub Daddy, the blue Scotch-Brite, and I don't have my magic eraser out here, but you could use a magic eraser as well. All of those things aren't going to scratch. So if you have a little bit of buildup along the back wall and you need to scrub it off, then you can use those products in order to clear it. It's not going to scratch too badly. The other product that we've recently discovered that we like is this stuff called Power Paste. This is made by the Scrub Daddy people as well. It's an all-natural product. It comes with its own applicator in the packet. It does a great job cleaning all manner of stains and discolorations on stainless, on porcelain enamel, on all sorts of stuff. So this is really handy. It's also gentle on your skin. It's not really, really harsh. So that's a great product. Now you're wondering to yourselves, like, okay, I am not LeBron James. I cannot reach the back of the oven with the door open, right? So remember that your convection steam oven has the very unique feature that the door comes off. So it's going to be hard to see, but we'll do our best to show you with the camera. There are 2 clips at the base of the hinge right here against the door. You want to pull that little clip forward so it touches the door itself. Now, don't pull the door off when it's flat like this. You want to raise it up till it stops naturally in what we call a resting position. So this is not always the easiest thing, and I will tell you, I mean, full transparency, I want to be honest with you guys. When they redesigned the door, they made the hinges a little longer than they used to be. It makes getting the door on and off not the easiest thing in America. It used to be much easier. So, but you want to grip it firmly by the sides and then slide it up and off the hinge like that. So you can see the door comes off relatively easily. Now, even a short person like myself can easily reach the back of the oven to clean it. So when you have those nasty stains on the back wall on the stainless and you want to clean it using either the power paste or the barkeeper's friend and the residual water that's left in the oven after the steaming, then by all means do that. Give it a nice scrubbing, easy to clean, very easy to maintain. Wipe it out with a damp cloth just so there's no residual cleanser in there. Perfect. You've got a beautifully clean oven. Now the hard part is putting this back on. You have to put it back on in the same manner that it came off. So let's see if I can line it up. This is never the easiest thing. But you get good at it. Aha. Oh, I thought I had it. There it goes. Nope. I will tell you, the old one was easier. There we go. So now it's on. Once it's down, you want to extend the door flat, relock the clips, and now your oven is set to go back to work. Then you can continue with the cleaning cycle by simply pressing enter, and it will do the finished drying, and you'll have a beautifully clean oven. That's all you need to do to clean the interior. You really don't have to do more than that. There's no 4-hour high heat cleaning cycle, anything like that. The only other thing that you will need to do over time is to descale the appliance. This will depend on, obviously, the hardness of the water in your neighborhood, in your home. You can adjust the water hardness by touching the settings button. And if you scroll down to where it says water hardness, you can then set it soft, medium, or hard, or very hard, right? Usually it comes with a test kit, but you probably know the hardness of your water in your own home, so you can adjust it accordingly. Obviously, if you're softening the water in your home, you would choose the soft feature. But for most people on municipal water systems, even here in Colorado, we're talking about a medium hardness. If you live on an artesian well, say out, on the eastern plains of Colorado, or maybe you're in Wyoming, something like that, you might have hard or very hard water, then I would suggest you adjust the hardness to that. What that's going to help you do is descale at the proper intervals in the care of your oven. So if I come back here and I go back to steam clean, right here is the descale feature. I would touch descale, right? In order to descale the appliance, I will need a bottle of this product, Swiss Steamer Descaling Solution. You can pick this up at any Roth Living showroom, or you can order it through Great Plains Factory Appliance Parts. Call your local showroom. They can ship some of this to you. Probably the easiest way to do it is to do that. Keep it on hand. Maybe you keep one in your pantry. Even with fairly hard water, you're not descaling more than once every 12, maybe 9 to 14 months. It's fairly infrequent. The beauty of this oven is that it will not only tell you when it needs to be descaled, right? But it will also allow you to skip the descaling process should you be in the middle of preparing something using your oven. So if you're in the middle of Thanksgiving and all of a sudden you get the little message that says oven needs to be descaled, you can say, no, skip that now. I need to do the rest of my Thanksgiving preparation. It'll allow you to skip it until such time that you have the time and the product in order to descale it. You're not going to kill it if you don't descale it right when it says to be descaled. So this is just going to step up. It'll walk you through step by step. The descaling solution will go into the reservoir. So even if you owned the plumbed version of the oven, You will have a reservoir for simply adding the descaling solution. Takes about 35 to 45 minutes to complete the entire process. But once that's done, your oven is cleaned out and you don't have any lime scale. And that's all you need to do to maintain the interior of the oven, is simply do that cleaning on a regular basis and the descaling whenever the oven calls for it. And that way you're just always reminded that the oven is there for you for that. So again, that's kind of the very basics of the oven. I would recommend that you use it as much as possible. Just remember that in many cases, you should be adjusting recipes in terms of shorter cooking times, and should you choose to, a lower cooking temperature, not only because of the addition of steam, but also in the addition of a smaller oven cavity, which makes a more compact area of heat, so things will cook a little bit faster, brown a little bit faster due to the nature of the oven cavity. So again, for most recipes, less cooking time, lower temperatures are an option, but not a necessity. Use those modes to their best use. But again, I would say to you, check your cookbook that you got from Wolf. Also look at your cooking guide. This placard will be really good. Use those gourmet modes. Use them because they're going to help you understand how the oven cooks. I think the best thing you could probably do is maybe this weekend, if you're not outside grilling for the 4th and all that good stuff, cook some chicken breasts in the oven. Stick them in there. Don't use the probe. Use the gourmet setting. Roast those chicken breasts. You'll be amazed that in 10 minutes, you have a beautifully moist, perfectly roasted chicken breast. Just fantastic. And it'll really give you a sense of how this oven can operate. So again, that's the best thing to do, is just use this oven, experiment with it. Every once, just try some new things in there. Once you found it, save it as a favorite. Then you can come back and recreate it all the time. Remember that here at the Culinary Scene, we're going to be sending out that invite for you very soon. I think you're going to find that the addition of the Culinary Scene to your catalog of support materials for the convection steam oven is going to become invaluable, because we're always adding to it. We're always trying to create new content for you, the people who have joined us here on our little adventure with Sub-Zero, Wolf, and Cove appliances. So if there are no more questions, I'm just about on time today. So let me thank everybody for joining us today. We hope to see you here at the Culinary Scene very, very soon. Thanks, and have a great evening.